All right, so you are here for the Understanding Search and Why Your Organization's Future Relies on It, presented by Adage. So today, I've got the course objectives listed for you here, but more specifically, I want to let you know a little bit about our new format. As you've been hearing me, if you're just now entering a first and last name in the Zoom ID tag for your CPE or CAE credits, we need both first and last name, and also let us know in the chat that you want credit. But additionally, as we go through the webinar today, there's going to be a couple of occasions where you will be asked a question or two additional, and it's probably going to be something simple such as, are you here? Or maybe a question about the topic. You need to make sure that you answer that. If you want CAE or CPE credit, we just need to have a timestamp that you're still here in the event. So just let us know those answers in the chat as we go through. All right, our course format today, we're going to spend a couple of moments going over how we're going to do this and then introducing the speaker. But then we have a section called Ask the Audience, and there are going to be two open-ended questions here that we really would like for you to participate in. You can either raise your hand and unmute yourself and answer that, or put your response into the chat. But in this portion, it's an area where we get to find out why you're here, what you're wanting to know more about, and to help inform the speakers of what your needs are, what your interests are, and so on and so forth. So I do highly encourage you. We're going to pause at that Ask the Audience slide and have you participate with us in that. We really want this to be an interactive webinar and encourage your participation there. Additionally, if you're just entering, make sure your name and association is on your Zoom ID. Let us know in the chat if you need CPE or CAE credits. And you can use the chat at any point throughout the webinar. You can go to the participant icon and raise your hand. If you have a question specifically for the speakers, we'll be monitoring that chat, or you can put your question into the chat. Otherwise, we do ask that you remain on mute, but you can unmute yourself and ask your question if you have something for the speakers. They are going to take Q&A throughout the webinar, so at any point that you have a question that you'd like clarification on, feel free to ask that. So I am Julie Duncan. I'm with US Transaction Corporation, and we know that you are looking to improve your bottom line and lower your risk overall. We're a merchant service provider. We specialize in credit card processing for associations specifically. And on my screen, you can see a 15-minute agenda that we start with our clients. We save on average 20 to 30% fee reduction, and we significantly improve your PCI compliance. I'm going to put my email as well as my meeting link in the chat. And if you would like this kind of discussion and find that it would be valuable for your organization, I do encourage you to reach out to me. Your instructors today are Jake Toohey and Joe Post, both of Adage Technologies, along with Eric Mathias of the American Academy of Pediatrics. They're going to introduce themselves a little bit further here in just a moment. But in the meantime, I do want to go ahead and pull up this Ask the Audience slide. Our questions for you here are, what would you like to get out of this webinar? And top of mind awareness for you today. I do highly encourage you to let us know in the chat. And Jake, I'm going to hand over to you. If you'll give a pause point here for the audience, we'd love to hear what their responses are. So this is for you now, Jake. I'm going to hand off to you.
All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Looks good.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Julie, for leading us into this. We want to also thank Wade for inviting us to be part of this educational series. Julie, Diana, Nicole, you've all been great working with us leading up to this session. So if we want to see what we want to get out of this webinar, can Julie, can you see, has anybody dropped anything in the chat yet?
Yes, you have a couple of things here. You have somewhat more information. Oops, it keeps moving on me. Sorry, hold on. Let's see. How to boost SEO results to drive more membership, attendance, and other revenues. To better understand, to have a better understanding of on-site search and how to improve search across multiple platforms.
Perfect. We will definitely be covering those today. So
yeah,
thanks for your responses, everybody.
Yeah, you've got a couple more I wouldn't mind reading for you.
Sure.
Search strategy refreshers. Organization has very little expertise on this topic, and we're redoing our website. More information on federated search of all platforms and paid search.
Awesome. Well, those are some of the major things we're going to be covering today, particularly federated search. We have a great story with our great partner, Eric from the AAP. So we are definitely going to be digging into that quite a bit. First, let's just get a couple quick intros out of the way. My name is Jake Toohey. I'm a senior digital consultant at Adage. I have been at Adage for 9 years now, and I work exclusively with associations and nonprofits. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'll turn it to Joe.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Post. I'm Vice President of Strategy and Design at Adage. I lead our user experience and strategy team, as well as analytics. I'm really excited to share some insight on the topic of search this morning. And Eric?
Yep. Hi, I'm Eric Mathias. I'm the Senior Director of Application Development and Support at the American Academy of Pediatrics, which I've been with for about 9 years now.
Great. So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to talk about why search is so critical, particularly for associations, what we call the 5 pillars of search engine optimization. So content strategy, why that's so important, how they go hand in hand with search, offsite search, onsite search, and then get a little bit into to reputation management and then paid search or PPC. So real quickly about Adage, we are a technology firm in downtown Chicago, and we work with 87% of our clients that are nonprofits, associations, mission-based organizations. I'll let Joe talk a little bit about our services because he runs most of those practices. So I'll turn it over to him.
Yeah, so as one of Adage's delivery leads, I lead the strategy, branding, and design analytics components of our services, which are comprehensive, including starting with user research. We do design thinking workshops that create strong visions and strategies for our clients. We also can help with branding updates or branding architectures, user experience design as it relates specifically to websites and web design. And of course, Adage at about 75 people, most of our staff is delivery staff and web development, and it's really a strength of ours. And of course, analytics is a key component of much of what we do now. Very specifically today, search and analytics go hand in hand. So really excited to share some more on some of these services with you today.
Thanks, Joe. In a minute here, I will turn it over to Eric, but what we wanted to make sure we get across is the AAP obviously is very large. They do a lot of great things, but they're still very relatable. The things we are going to talk about, specifically about search, these are things that all associations should be paying attention to, investing in. So I'll let Eric tell a little bit more about the AAP, tell their story. We're very excited to have him join us for this, and I'll turn it to him.
Sure. So American Academy of Pediatrics, we're an organization of 67,000 pediatricians, member-based, committed to the optimal physical, mental, and social health and well-being of all infants, children, adolescents, and young adults. One of the things that's great about working for the Academy is being able to have the mission and being able to work for pretty much not just for pediatricians, but we were working for children. We have 67,000 members, 10 districts, 66 state local chapters, 30 national committees, you can read the rest, 460 employees in Chicago and Washington, D.C. Our core functions is policy development, advocacy, education, research, and service to members. We do a lot of publications. We have journals. We have a lot of different content associated across the academy. One of the things too to add is, you know, out of everything that we search, we have about over 60,000 pieces of content that we search.
Right, and so we've been working with the AAP since 2013 when we started by rebuilding their e-commerce platform. But about 4 years ago, we went into this digital transformation initiative, right? And it really started with in-depth user research, talking to members. I'll let Joe and Eric maybe give a little bit more background before we talk about some of the things we found and which led us to the search platform discussion.
So yeah, as kind of the starting point for the digital transformation initiative, one of the first things that we really took a deep dive on was to understand the member sentiments and some of their concerns and things that they were looking to see improved as far as the various digital platforms that are part of the Academy's overall digital ecosystem. We actually did make the choice pretty early on to focus on search as that initial stage of our transformation because of the member sentiment around it. And Eric, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, a couple things. One thing, search has been a key, which we'll go over in a lot of detail here, has been a key feature that all of our members have been asking for. And in the beginning, before we went through our DTI, Digital Transformation Initiative, it was very spread out, very siloed. I'm sure everybody experiences this. And one of the things that we've been trying to do, and we still today are struggling with it, but we're doing a much, much better job, is trying to keep it into one unified platform and get everything together, allow our members to be able to go to one place to find anything. So we continue to drive on that. And this initiative, working with Adage has been, you know, great. In the last 4 years, we've done a lot of improvements. And of course, our members and the individuals that we work with all the time, with all the pediatricians, they keep asking for more because they see what's going on.
Right, and so just to dig a little deeper, when we did this research, there was some of these sentiments that we found were things that people were going to Google, they're going to Wikipedia for, you know, less credible information, even sometimes at the point of care when they're actually dealing with patients. Internally, you know, staff acknowledged that memberships were potentially at risk because people came to the website, couldn't find what they're looking for. They're not going to want to be part of the organization. So we knew we needed to value immediacy over credibility. That competition for resources were created by those silos that Eric just mentioned, and silos were contributing to the content issue. So this member understanding, it's a very important piece of search and was a huge step for the AAP in the digital transformation. So Eric, I'll let you elaborate a little bit more on that.
Sure, yeah. So a lot of our content, just to let everybody know, with one of the biggest things after, you know, with search and integrating the search was taking, you know, just on aap.org alone, we had 10,000 different pages. We have 30,000 pieces of content overall with video and documents and everything else. So we had to get that all into one place, and that's just on aap.org. Then we have 10 other sites, you know, and trying to centralize all of that and get all that information into one place.
And we talk about the gap, and this is something that you know, Joe presented to the board early on during this DTI, and we knew that the members were basically fulfilling the mission of the AAP in spite of the experience that they had, and they were complaining to the board about the poor search experience, like we talked about. You know, they couldn't find anything. And that the connection to a bad user experience is really a reflection on the brand. So we needed the members to trust the brand. This is really Joe's area of expertise. I'll let him talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, so the way that presents for the AAP is that they have a lot of content, as we've described, and a lot of different platforms to house that content. And one of the first things that we did was kind of assess which were the platforms that were really impacting the user experience. And what we found is there were about 16 different websites. They were the commerce site, the .org or corporate site. They also have a publications site and an online learning site. Those are the major platforms. There were a number of other platforms. But the main concern we had as far as the branding is that because the brand was different on each of these platforms, and the experience different. There were cases where in our interviewing of members, they would say to us, oh, we didn't even know that that platform was part of AAP. And that was part of the brand fragmentation related to search that we, look to correct as part of this digital transformation initiative. The way that we talk about that is we wanted one search box for all of these platforms. And that really was the brand expectation that the membership had. They wanted to be able to go to aap.org and find everything related to AAP in that one search box, which is what we have effectively done is we pulled all this content together from these various platforms into that singular search experience.
So we do have an Ask the Audience, and we hope we get participation. I think that's always the most fun way to run a webinar. But I'll ask Eric if he has anything before we get to that. Anything to add, Eric?
One of the things is, like Joe was saying, having that single search box has been the biggest amount of feedback from our members, and that everybody wants to go and be able to find one place. And in the past, we had like 15, 20 different search boxes, and you had to go to this place to find this place to find that, and it definitely hurt. Like Joe was going over our brand. By centralizing this into one location, it has helped, not only help our brand, but also help members be able to find exactly what they need.
Cool. So we'll do our first Zoom hand raise. If we wanted to ask how many of you have heard this before. I actually was in a workshop yesterday with a client, and this is one of the first things that came out of people's mouths is they go to Google to search content on the site. Maybe your analytics show that the entry point for most users to your content pages is from Google. That's something we hear quite a bit of too. So Julie, if there's anybody that's raising their hand or anything we can touch on here, any feedback?
Now, what I would say, Jake, is have everybody put into Zoom their answer to this question. Do they experience? I guess what is your question exactly?
How many have you heard this before? Have you heard your members say, "I go to Google to find content from your site"?
Let's have everybody just answer yes or no in chat.
See the answers rolling in.
Jake, are you able to see the chat?
I'm not able to right now just because I'm presenting. So Joe, if you could, if you wouldn't mind reading.
Yeah, we're getting a mixture of yeses and nos. Some at a previous organization, some at their current. Some saying yes, I've heard of this, and I Google myself instead of our internal search. Some say sometimes. So it looks like we've gotten maybe about 20 different responses there. So it's a good mixture, but certainly there are some that have heard this.
One question that did come in about, is this just about the AP search? It's also about Google and how it searches as well. Just answer that, one of the ones that came in on chat.
Yeah, Michael, Jake, I'm sorry. Michael Hughes had his hand up at one point. Michael, I don't know if you still have a question for Jake and Joe.
No, I was just raising my hand. Yes to the question.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, gotcha. Thank you.
All right, great. All right, well, I will. Yeah.
I was just going to say one person actually said in chat, yes, I heard this, and I Googled myself instead of our internal search. So I think this is exactly what AAP was trying to address.
Yeah, it's pretty common. Mm-hmm. And these are just some of the things that we often talk about when we're dealing with association clients. It's these 5 very common challenges that we see. And it starts really with understanding the audience, and that's both internal, it's external audiences, talking about meeting their expectations. We really need to meet them where they are. And then there's the content piece. Eric mentioned 60,000 pieces of content on their web platforms. So associations all have a ton of content. It's almost always best in class, academic, and if you can't find it, which leads kind of to the search piece, finding that content, that's what we're talking about today. That's really the most important thing when you have such great content. You need to be able to find it. Your users need to be able to find it. So personalization is a thing that everyone says they want, and so everybody needs it, but you can't enable good personalization without doing the first 3 correctly. Finally, the disparate technology systems. Everybody's got an AMS, CMS, LMS, community platform, publications. Eric touched on this a bit earlier, but members expect to find the content from all of your platforms in one place. So I'm sure these are issues for a lot of the people that are here today. And if anybody has anything in the chat to add, we'll touch on those as we go. But you're all, like I mentioned, producing tons of content. But how often are you looking at it, looking back and seeing how it's performing? So one of the things we want to get through to everyone today is that search really is one of the most important digital assets that you have. So real quickly before we dive in, there's a story that Eric and Joe and I really like when the CEO of the AAP, Mark Del Monte, described the content problem that they had. Was like, they had them coming from so many different sources, so much content, and they have this beautiful lobby in their new building at the AAP in Chicago, and there's this big atrium. And so what Mark said is that there's all this content and there's all these departments, and they would just go to the upper levels and just dump all the content into the atrium, and it was just laying there. Didn't make sense. Nobody could find anything. So I'll ask Joe and Eric if they have anything else to add on that little story.
I really like this story because it gives us a really nice kind of visualization of what the culture is like, right? And I think part of the story here is that, like many associations, the AP produces best-in-class content, and they're really great at it. And I think it's something that they're recognized for. But the way that the organization had been treating content up until our digital transformation initiative began was, basically to create this great content and, effectively dump it on the website. And over time, you just can imagine this vast, accumulation of content, but not a ton of attention being put on, evaluating if the content is still relevant, evaluating if the content is still performing, evaluating if the user experience around the content is where it needs to be. For example, can I find the latest policy statement? So in a sense, this is a good, kind of analogy for us to describe kind of a cultural statement and also describe what we're trying to kind of correct, right? So, in terms of our vision for the digital transformation, we're looking to implement a content strategy that helps us kind of rethink or reimagine how we're treating content. Not so much changing, how they go about producing the high quality content, because that part was already working. It's more about how to put that onto a digital platform that's going to allow that content to really shine and perform at its best.
So a couple of things to kind of add to what Joe was saying too. One of the things we were in the past was we were paper first. It was mostly print first and everything, and that's what made it a little bit challenging. Going digital and having everything digital and organized digital was, even our website was very print first. I'm sure a lot of people, PDFs. You have so many different PDFs and everything with your content, and taking those and then organizing them into a web page is a different strategy, a different way of doing things, and has been a key thing in trying to organize our platform and organizing our content in general. I think also, having all this content, it was a challenge, and it's been a challenge over the last few years of taking that content and really organizing it in a way that it's not only easy to find, but you're also using the data that's at hand with Google Analytics and everything else to see what is actually being accessed and what is there, and allowing yourself to, something that isn't being accessed anymore, to archive it. That's one of the things too, is a lot of associations, I think, are very, I always kind of say, it's almost like a hoarding thing of content. It's like no one wants to get rid of their content. And that was a key thing of, okay, what is critical and what do we need? And, really focus on that is the key stuff.
All right. So why search engine optimization is so important. Almost every online experience starts at the search box. So if you want to stay top of mind to your members, you need to be investing in search. And obviously, that's what we're getting across today. So we're talking about these 5 pillars of SEO, and content strategy and how it goes hand in hand with a great search experience is the first piece, but then we'll get into more of the offsite search, onsite search, searching on your website, and then reputation management, PPC. So first, this is really your baseline. Strategy and search is the baseline. We're going to talk about why they go hand in hand. And really what this means and what we're talking about is that your website's your biggest channel for marketing, it's biggest digital channel. Eric and Joe can talk about what happens when the site, and Joe actually kind of touched on this, but when the site's used as as a dumping ground for content, or it's structured like an org chart, the issues that can come up from that. So I'll let you guys talk a little bit more.
Yeah, I think the relationship with content strategy here is really the first key point, right? So in terms of really thinking through how do I, so to some of the questions that were posted, right? How do I increase my search engine optimization results? How do I, get a better page rank? How do I increase or improve the user experience? For us, all of that really begins with content strategy. The content strategy, and in particular, the parts that are typically missed or missing are the planning stage, where you're thinking through who is this content for and what are their specific needs for this content and how it should be delivered, what's the best channel for it. And it's not always the website. So that's where the comment about the website being the dumping ground is that frequently what we find is that the culture has put so much emphasis on it's got to be online, but we haven't really fully considered what's the right place online for it. That's really the starting point for thinking through your search engine approach. In addition, just wanted to add on to this comment about like all these searches are the initiating point, but that's just focused offsite, right? That's the Google part. There's also the onsite, so the search box within your website. And both of those are search engines. So when we're talking about SEO, we really want to make sure we're clear that we're talking about both search boxes.
Because, yeah, and to kind of add to what Joe just said too is, one of the things is if you fix your internal stuff, Google definitely picks it up and just makes it even better with Google. And that's one of the things with the content strategy, that what it's done is it's allowed us to be able to question the content that's coming in. Does it actually belong? Should we actually put this on the homepage? Everybody wants to display everything online, but you do have to ask that question, and you do have to have that governance associated to your content strategy. Otherwise, it makes it even more difficult without that governance as well.
And Joe has a, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say it's governance on both ends of the process, right? So it's governance on the plan, and it's governance on the evaluation on its performance. So this is the point of not just creating this vast archive. It is also to assess, is a content performing the way we need it to? Is it still useful? Is it still relevant? And at times those are just really clearly user experience expectations. We have some examples of that a little bit further in, where one of the things that we learned in gathering feedback from the members is that with policy statements in particular, the most important thing for them was that it's the latest, right? And so while we do want to still keep an archive of all the previous, we find that to optimize the experience, we want to focus the results on the most recent.
Right, because I'll let Joe explain his Homer car analogy, but just to relate this to content and just dumping everything and not organizing it, I'll let Joe explain that.
I get some joy out of that episode of The Simpsons where Homer's asked as a kind of everyman to design a car for every man. And of course, it ends up in this ridiculous combination of features that only, of course, the cartoon Homer would love. But too often, I think this is, effectively the approach for content strategy in websites, where, if everyone's allowed to, put their content wherever they felt like putting their content, then you end up with websites that are like this kind of literalization of the Homer car, where you get lots and odds and ends, and maybe it's still a functional car, but it's not exactly a streamlined car. And it's certainly not a car that you could market effectively. If you think about that, extended analogy, if I'm a car buyer, I'm going to be looking for something specific to my needs, right? And in this case, you're getting every kind of manifestation of a car all in one. And frequently, that's what a website experience is like today. Without enough attention paid on content strategy, you end up with, this just accumulation of features rather than something, streamlined and marketable to a particular persona.
Yeah, and I'll let Joe explain this a little bit more, but you really have to ask yourself some of these questions when you're talking about content strategy.
Yeah, so these are just the first couple of questions to help, kind of initiate a content strategy. Really starting with, do you understand your audience? And again, thinking about that Homer car idea, who is this car for? And what are their needs for it? Are they looking for more utility, or are they looking for something that's more of a showpiece? And who are we making this content for? And these are really key questions because, frequently what I find with associations is that they typically have really great channels for content, but maybe aren't fully optimizing their content for each channel. So you can imagine if you have a social presence, maybe there's content that's specific for that, that's a really great fit there, but maybe it's not a great fit for the homepage. And some of these questions are really key in asking, are we putting the content in the right place for the right people? Of course, the key stages are important as well.
Sorry, I jumped ahead to Zoom hand raise, but keep going, Joe.
Sure. So I'm sorry, what was the Zoom hand raise? Oh, the questions. I got you. So yeah, so I mean, I guess we can ask this question. I mean, is this resonating with our audience here? Are you experiencing similar challenges at your organization where the digital platform, the website specifically, has just become a dumping ground, or maybe it's reflecting the org chart? That's something that we also often see, is that the website information architecture, your navigation, if you will, is not a user-centered or member-centered navigation. It's more of just, every department had to be represented, so then it reflects an org chart. So both of those for us kind of indicate that, a content strategy is needed.
And I also have a reminder that you'll need to answer in the chat for credits. So even if it's a yes to still being here, then we will need to timestamp those. So Joe, is there anything in the chat that you want to touch on? Anybody mention anything?
Yeah, there's a couple questions here. To what extent are you conducting surveys to determine if you're meeting your goals? Docs are really busy. To what extent going for docs, med people versus consumers? In the case of AAP, we found that one of the most effective times to interview members where we can have a lot of them present is at conferences. So one of the ways that we conducted our user interviews, our user experience research, was at AAP's various conferences, both their national conference and their leadership conference. And in doing so, we were able to interview, I mean, it's dozens of people at this point. I think it's well over 100. I don't have an exact number, but because of attending conferences, we were able to get more one-on-one feedback and cover a lot of ground very quickly. We have also done surveys, and one of the other things that we do frequently is we create feedback loops within the search experience. And if you were to visit the AAP's search functionality, you would see a little pop-up on there that asks if you've completed your search successfully. And that has really helped inform some of the user experience design there. So it seems like, many of the responses, Jake, are yeses, that we don't have content strategy. And yes, we don't remove any content, and there's resistance to making changes. So there's a mixture though. Some are saying no, some are saying yes. Others are mentioning that they survey their members at least once per month on various topics and issues. So that's interesting.
Eric, do you have anything to add on what you guys do as far as surveying members?
I think the feedback loop was definitely the key thing, because what happens at like the national conferences is you get the strong individuals that can come and speak their mind very well, or the ones that are coming to the booths and talking, which is great. You get that feedback, but then you also want a lot of other feedback from individuals that maybe will do it, from a digital feedback type area. But beware, because some of that feedback is quite interesting as well. So
yeah, I mean, the internet's always like any social group, right? You'll get the ones who misbehave, and you'll get the ones who are trying to help. Yeah, so there's a couple of the comments here. What to do about resistance to change? That part is, I think, part of the cultural change. And the answer, at least for AAP in part, is that we created a content strategy group that was an AAP staff group. And they've done quite a lot of work to educate other staff. So as kind of keepers of this vision for an updated content strategy, they've done a lot of work to communicate why it's important and really work with the staff to bring them up to speed on some of the changes in approach to content.
I would say that was probably the most challenging. Change in general, is definitely difficult for any organization, but taking something and hearing, well, this is the way we've always done it, and being able to say, well, is it the best way, and just challenge all the time. It definitely made a lot of people uncomfortable. But in the end, afterwards, we've gotten a lot of good feedback across the organization, and everybody sees that, it's been a great change.
Yeah, there's a question about how to handle the perception that it's not broken, and so why do we need to fix it mentality of colleagues who have had long tenures. That's part of visioning for us to create a compelling reason for change, and it's kind of across the board. But again, partly why we emphasize user research so heavily is because we want the user experience to be informed by members' actual needs. So if we change the conversation of being about a tenured staff to what is your membership asking for, that can help quite a bit. And the other part I'd add is the analytics can help quite a bit too. And using data to inform decision making can be really a key way to influence someone, especially the ones who have been around a long time, to see things differently and maybe ask a different question.
Yeah.
Anything else to add, Eric, before we go
Yeah,
on?
I was just going to say, just to add to what Joe just said, that the data and the feedback were definitely key things of, showing that to everybody. Definitely kind of solve that problem of, well, is it really broken? I don't understand. Is it, but then you see that feedback and you're like, okay, we definitely need to make a change. Our members, the users that, that are looking at our content are saying this, we need to do something.
Yeah, and I think some of the most compelling statements that we found, for example, is this idea that relevance and immediacy is more important than credibility and authority, and that can come across as kind of shocking if you're best-in-class content creators and people are telling you that, hey, I'm going to go to Wikipedia instead of your website because it's easier and faster. And I think that kind of statement does tend to resonate. All right, should we keep going here, Jake?
Yeah, so we're on to offsite search, which we say is the second pillar of SEO. And we kind of describe it as being outside, something you can control outside of your zone. But obviously there are things that you can control, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But first, how important is it? More than half of traffic comes from organic search. So organic search is 5 to 6 times more effective than paid ads or PPC. And the problem is that most people think SEO is just Google. So Joe, talk a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think this is part of what we wanted to share today is that when we think about SEO, we're thinking about not just Google, and there are other search engines. You have your Bing and your DuckDuckGos of the world. There are other search engines as starters, but a lot of people think thinking SEO, we're thinking Google. Certainly, Google is the most dominant force. But there's more to it than that. And I think that's the kind of key thing for us here is like SEO, as Eric had said earlier, if you get your content strategy right on your website, not just Google will be happier, right? Your members will be happier and your internal site search will be a better experience as well.
So, Google doesn't publish their algorithm, but what are some of the factors that are probably most important right now? It's things, and this changes all the time. Things like AI, voice search, natural language queries, local search listings is big. And then there's things like rich snippets based on your content, mobile friendliness, obviously, image optimization, and video, which we're going to talk about in a minute here, why that's so important. But I'll let Joe talk about some of the other factors that go into SEO right now.
The main summary statement I'd say, if I were to boil this all down, is that Google is really emphasizing user experience over many other factors. So we're well past the age where things like keyword stuffing are really methods to influence Google. In a lot of cases, in fact, some of those old tactics are pretty much ignored. So really the emphasis now is on really great content, really great authority and credibility around that content, and really great experience of consuming that content. You think about, is the content scannable? Is it easy to consume? Does it include video? There's a lot of different factors, but really at the end of the day, if your content is delivered in a really great user experience, you're going to get better results with Google.
And we talk about how you already have the channels right now, most likely. Joe kind of touched on this, but Google boosts for having social media. You have to be active with it, but things like YouTube video embeds, those get boosts. So Eric, Joe, is there anything else here that you would touch on before we get on to?
Yeah, I think this is a little, it's a good point to make, because part of Google's kind of assessment of your authority and credibility also includes things that maybe people don't don't assume would be included, but having a social presence, for example, is a factor for Google. And having a social presence that's active and engaged is a factor. And certainly, I think Google has a lot of opinions about how search should work. And one of those opinions is that, you know, content that includes video gets a little boost. And sometimes it's even subtle things like having a privacy policy on your website can give you a little subtle boost too. So it's usually an accumulation of factors that leads to great results with Google. The other point I'd make here is that oftentimes a great way to start with content strategy is to understand what is the full ecosystem of your digital presence. And if it includes social media, YouTube, you know, think about what is the right content for each of those channels. And it also helps kind of break out of this. The website isn't the only opportunity to promote your content. And many times your end users, your members are looking for that content in a format that they enjoy. So sometimes it's, you know, fun videos on YouTube, or maybe it's stories on Instagram. Those can actually have much more engagement and be a better place for some types of content.
And we do a lot of social media outreaches, posting at least every day, once a week. We've done a ton during the pandemic from the Academy perspective. And you could definitely tell from, you know, looking at Google Analytics, like when we do a policy and we push that out through social media, you can see it not only coming in from organic searches from Google, but just overall people going to the site just from the social media displays. So.
Yeah, and one of the cool things that you guys do, you know, we talked about going to the conference to get, you know, getting a booth and doing member research, but one of the channels that you guys have. So I'll let Eric talk a little bit more about, you know, this the booth at the national conference where the doctors give testimonials. We always like talking about that story.
Yeah, and all of the doctors, all of the members, you know, at one point or another, they love to definitely be engaged. I mean, we have a lot of different section councils and committees that a lot of people are involved in. I mean, the advocacy for the organization is huge. And at the booth, we have different areas where people collect all of the information that they're saying, not only on the site, but the Academy in general. And, you know, most of it is great feedback to where we use it, you know, good or bad, you know, we display it just because we want to make sure everybody understands that, you know, we know this is going on and we know we're in the same page and we're going in the right direction. So this is always a big win and a big area of feedback from all of our members.
And then you put it on YouTube. You've got the your page. You have this social proof, and you have member engagement as a result of doing this work at the conference. But you're using that channel, the YouTube channel, for.
It's been a huge it's been a huge change across the organization. Is we had multiple channels at one point, and then it made a lot of sense to centralize that, you know, and we made a commitment across the Academy to make sure that, okay, this is our YouTube channel. This is, you know, what we're going to do. This is how we're going to organize it. And it's helped not only make sure and get the correct information out to the members, it's helped just with the social media and posting and the Google organics getting back to the site information as well.
Joe, anything else to add there?
You know, the parts that I really love about some of these approaches is that it really foregrounds the member, you know, and it makes the membership the star of the you know, the content that's being created. And I think that that's a really effective way to, you know, think about a different type of content, but also a different way of thinking about how to create that content and who it's really for. And in these cases where the pediatricians are able to be the star of the show, if you will, I think those tend to be really influential and really successful pieces of content. And of course, they're hosted in different places, right? So in this case, they're hosted either on Twitter, and the AP has a group called the Pediatricians, and they also have their YouTube presence, which is got a lot of different things on it. Should we continue, Jay?
So yeah, so you know, another channel that we wanted to touch on is the consumer-facing version of your content. In the case of the AP, you know, you have ap.org, and that's for members. That's for things like policy, but it also can be kind of scary to parents if you're trying to look for some information and you're seeing things about infectious diseases. So that's why they created this other site as a consumer-facing version. So Eric, I don't know if you want to talk about how you guys started this, how you conceptualized it, and the successes you've seen.
Sure. Mainly what it is in a nutshell, pretty much is kind of the audience perspective is AAP.org. We focus on the member. We focus more on the detail, the clinical information on AAP.org. When Healthy Children was created to go after the parents and really take some of the policy information, take some of the data, take some of the advocacy information and really display it for parents, you know. It's been an awesome site. I mean, we have over 5,500 pages. We get like 1 million hits a month on the site. Actually, no, I take that back. This site, we get 9 million. We get 1 million on AAP.org. So we get a lot of different feedback. We keep advancing on the improvements of healthychildren.org because of all the publications and everything that come out on the parenting information.
Cool. And this is kind of our pausing point for another Zoom hand raise. The question that we thought about was, does anyone have any interesting things that they'd like to share, things that they're doing with offsite search? I want to make sure that we're touching on any questions that might be in the chat. So Joe, if you wouldn't mind taking a look at those.
All right. Yeah, so there's a question from a few minutes ago about what to do with outdated information or if a new edition is released. You know, one of the things that we've done with policy statements is to just really leverage the search engine that we built to increase the relevance to really reflect the interest in the most recent version. So we are keeping that archive, and for policy statements in particular, I think that's important. But for the search experience, we actually have a little toggle on that sorts out the results to really emphasize the most recent. Let's see, in terms of, there's another question about videos to get better results. You know, right now, the basic suggestion is that if you have a YouTube video as part of your content, that can help. But there's more detail, of course, about length, and I would say it's debatable. There's different inputs, different people say different things about how long and so on. Let's see, we're getting, as far as the question here, does anyone have any interesting things they'd like to share about offsite search? A few no's. Seeing someone saying, I wish I'd known about it sooner. Nothing to share. My org is not as sophisticated or advanced, but we hope to improve. Someone says, expanding social media engagement has boosted our content sharing. So there's a couple comments there. Should we keep going, Jake?
Yeah, sure. So we'll talk about the third pillar now, and that's the on-site search. And we think it's really a key of driving member experience. And you know, Joe talked about the single search box to rule them all. Before I dig into that, just have to put my data points up here. But we know that 53% or more of users go directly to the search box when they visit a website. So they expect to get the same experience as they do when they go to Google. And you know, the funny thing is that I think of everyone who answered that survey that was sent out before you registered for today, half the responses said you don't know where the first interaction is on the website. So I mentioned one search box to rule them all, and that's the federated search. I know that's some things that people talked about at the onset here. But for associations, it's critical. I think a lot of people, most people know that because of the amount of content that you have. You know, it's industry leading content. And this page right here, this is the AAP search page. But you can see there's things like policy, journals, publications, shop, news, and a few more things. But Google really has trained people to expect this, right? So you go to Google, you don't think of the features. We're going to show some features from this search experience in a second here, but when you go to Google, you don't think about the features. You just show up and search for something. You don't go to Amazon search, or I'm sorry, you go to Amazon, you search, and you just buy stuff. It's a stated expectation, and it's not a stated expectation, I should say. It's an experience expectation. So I'll ask Joe and Eric to weigh in a little bit more on the significance there.
Yeah, so I just want to emphasize this is you know, this is also a search engine. It's different than the Google search engine. And some of the optimizations here are going to be more particular than the ones for Google. So it's a different category of search engine optimization. This one's really focused on what can I do with the content on my website and what can I do with the search engine experience on my website. In this case, we've built a federated search that pulls in content or say search results from about 16 different websites. The number changes as we're consolidating websites, but the main ones are kind of listed in blue in the middle there. And part of what we've done here is we've also taken some categories and combined them. So actually, for example, AAP has multiple outlets for news, but we found in the user experience research that the membership just wanted one place to go for news. And it was actually confusing to them to have multiple places for news. So part of what we've done in the background is we've combined different data sources into a single category so that it's easier to navigate.
And to kind of expand a little bit on that too, is as you can see, a lot of the categories are based on, areas of where the content are. And then, one of the things that we have developed, but we continue to develop is kind of like a global taxonomy to really help drive, for each one of them. And, it's not that silo effect, and each area has its own taxonomy, which makes it even more difficult to search. When you drill in, you don't want to have your facets different in every single drill in. So that's definitely been something, that we focused on. And, one of the things that was discussed is one of the key areas whenever somebody says, Google does it, why can't you? That's always something where you're like, yeah, well, it is very challenging, and it's not something that's easy. So, if you aren't doing it and you're trying to start doing this, just remember it does take time, and it's not something you can't just be like Google overnight.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point too, in terms of thinking about how to address this, right? Because it's, we don't think of SEO in any case, regardless of category, as a set it and forget it. There isn't a situation where you can just, we've done all the work and we're done and we can just let the thing coast. It really needs ongoing care and attention paid to continuing to optimize the search results and making sure that the relevance and all of the boosting and so on is still working and meeting member needs.
All right, so I'll keep us going here, and we just want to pause real quick. I think we're doing pretty good on time. So just for a minute here, we're interested in hearing how many websites or applications some of you may have, and if you have that single search box to rule them all before we start walking through kind of the features of AAP's search experience.
Yeah, so this is a really key question to consider. How many platforms do you have, and how many of those platforms are coming into that search box? Or do you have the case of 16 search boxes? We often see commerce, the CMS. Sometimes we get the social or the community websites in the mix. Sometimes there's a LMS or learning management system. So frequently we see associations have many platforms.
And that's definitely been something we've been working on for the last 4 years, is kind of consolidating some of the ones, some of the smaller ones, trying to put that all in aap.org, and not have a lot of siloed smaller sites that are just being run. And we've narrowed it down, but we still have, 20, about 15 to 20 different sites that we search from. So it makes it a little bit challenging, but, we definitely have a process for it now today.
Joe, do we got anything in the chat that?
Yeah, we're getting a few comments, a few saying they don't have a single search box, a few saying they have one website, but a gabillion subsidiary pages, one search box that supposedly works, but it really doesn't. Another comment saying they have at least 5 platforms. A main issue is commerce is different from our main web page in LMS. Yeah, that's a frequent one where the commerce search box is different and the experience is different. Let's see. So a couple others saying they have 2 and a few chapter sites. They have 3 or 4 pulled into a single search box. So we see some of you have worked on that singular search box. Another comment saying we have 11 microsites, but don't think we have federated search. Others saying 2 websites plus an AMS. Others saying, yes, we have a single search box on a CRM platform. It works well, has off-the-shelf limits. Someone has a question. Scott has a question. Say, how do you factor microsites, say, for conferences that may change year to year? That's an interesting question. A lot of times we see conferences are still separate websites. And I think there's pros and cons to that approach, but that's an interesting one.
Eric, you can probably weigh in on that one.
Yeah. I think, go ahead.
We have that today. No, we have that today. And a lot of it's just because, we haven't gotten to the point where we've been able to migrate that over, or it's a vendor that we're working with the major conferences that also has the website and builds out to work with the events group. It's definitely an area that we've talked about and something that we need to consider in the future, but it's not an easy task. Another question that I saw here too was about healthy children and being in there, and that's just keeping all the AAP content in one place. If you go to Healthy Children though and you search, it goes to the same search location, but it is branded differently to keep the same parent branding the same across the organization. So I just wanted to make a note of that just so that everybody understands.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting part of the federated search on AAP is that it has that other brand integrated with it. It also has additional layers of personalization that change the experience very slightly if you're a member. So there's some different features you'd see if you're a member than if you're just coming from Healthy Children as a parent.
All right, so I'll keep us going here. And we mentioned this being a huge step in the AAP and their digital transformation initiative. So that search box being a major factor in driving a cultural transformation. So real quickly, Eric and Joe, if you want to touch on that a little bit before we get into to search experience itself.
Yeah, so when we started this digital transformation initiative, we really wanted to focus on high impact areas. So, in our research, we found that search was unfortunately a pretty standard complaint. It was a pain point for a lot of members, and that really drove the choice to start the technology end of the transformation with search. And within the first year, we got to the point where the technology, the platform was stood up, it was working as expected. And what it really helped us identify was that without content strategy, helping with a cultural change, changing an attitude about how to produce and manage content, that the search engine itself would never get to the point where we needed it to be. And it allowed us really to provide illustration of that issue, right? And one of the ways that came through that Eric had mentioned is the multitude of PDFs, which, in 2021, a PDF really is not a digital format anymore. It has specific use cases that I would argue, if you need a paper trail or a form or something like that, but by and large, PDFs really aren't suitable for a web experience. It's much the same as a CD, like my computer doesn't even have a CD player anymore. And I think a PDF is kind of, for me, very similar. It used to be a way to do it, but no longer is. And that was one example of, how we illustrated the cultural change that was needed, right? Stop producing as many PDFs and start thinking about, the right channel and format for this content. But I would, Eric, anything to add there?
Yeah, and just to expand on the PDF aspect, that's a huge cultural shift for us. But we've definitely started focusing on that because now whenever somebody's creating a PDF, they definitely reach out and say, okay, we're creating this PDF, but how do we also make this so that it's a web page? What sort of content and what sort of strategy do we need to do when we're building this as a PDF that we want to share as a brochure and printable, but still have it searchable on the website? How do we do that? And it's working with our editorial team on a regular basis to do that. The other thing is on the search aspect, overall, you can't just set it and forget it. You have to have, a person or a group of individuals that know the content, know the data, know what's going on so that they can put in the correct information and make sure that the strategy is in place, and keep checking the search, keep making sure that, if you put in vaccine, that you're getting back all the relevant information at the top, and it's not going into page 5, so you need to keep focusing on that and focus on events that are going on now and having people do the checks and balances across the search content.
So I'll move on to, when we were preparing for this this webinar, we were talking about, what's a good baseline for search. And, I have a couple of features here that I'll walk through in a second. But we're looking at if you don't have a good experience now, how do you get to baseline? How do you get to good? You need things like autocomplete, facets. You're going to need pagination. That's something that some sites shockingly don't have. And then sorting. So people need to be able to sort. This is how they find things on Amazon. This is how they buy things. So that's what we identified as kind of the baseline. And then I'll ask Joe and Eric to talk a little bit more, and then we'll talk about kind of the advanced features to get you to a great experience.
Yeah, I think the point you made earlier, Jake, is that these are the unstated expectations. Like no one's going to come to you and say, "Hey, I need your search to have facets," but they expect it. And part of that training is from like your Amazons of the world. If you're shopping on Amazon, you may not even know all the functionality that you're touching. And that's why we thought it would be interesting to you to kind of just call out what are some of the specific functions of say an adequate search experience that maybe you don't even really pay attention to. And that's what this list really is about. So things like facets that show you the number of results available. So here you can see news releases. There's 17 that fit this idea of juice, and we're able to sort them. And again, this is very transparent for a user. They probably wouldn't notice it if it's there. Although if it's not there, they probably would be complaining. So that's kind of the point of this section.
And one of the things, once you do baseline, if you haven't already kind of put in the baseline, one of the things is it's more like, okay, thanks. Now you're where you should be. Now do more. Now I want to see more type thing. That was kind of the feedback once we got to this spot. Is it's like, okay, this is great. Okay, what about more? So that's definitely the key thing to think about here.
And then we talk about getting to the great search experience. I do remember that, Eric, when we were real excited when the kind of baseline search went live. It was performing very well, and then it was, keep it going, continuous improvement, something that we preach a lot. But certainly with the search experience, I'll walk through a couple things that you need to optimize and get to a great search experience. It's things like Booleans, things like date and relevance, that should be in there. Context selection. Joe, talk about this, or Joe and Eric talk about this real quick as it relates to federated search.
Yeah, so this is an interesting component of the federated search because for example, policy for AAP today is still a separate platform. They have a publications platform specifically for policy in their journals. And it is a frequent member ask, where do I find the latest policy? And the other contexts you see here are either specifically other platforms that we're pulling in, or they're combos. So in some cases, we're taking multiple platforms and combining them. So as in the case of news here, we also show healthy children in this list, which is a totally different website as well. So the context selection allows the user to very quickly narrow the scope of their search from everything AAP to a specific category of things that they're looking for. I think that was someone's question about do people use the section under all AAP? It's a mixed bag, and that is some of the feedback that was pretty early on, and we've made some adjustments to help users identify their context selection more quickly or easily. We do find that it works pretty well, but it's always a mixture of things there in terms of that. So
no, and it's definitely helped us to bring us into like a personalization area as well, to where when you're logged on, you can also offer stuff that's locked and whatnot that's in there based on the different content, because like 95% of our stuff is public, but we do have 5% that's just for members only, or maybe it's just for this select group that purchased this book, they have an add-on or something like that. So it allows us to get to that level as well.
Right, and that's a good example here is that the member directory is not shown on screen here because it's not publicly available. But if you were logged in as a member, you would see access in this list to a member directory.
So I'll keep going with a couple more. Things like keyword highlighting, boosting. I think this one's kind of interesting. I'll let Joe and Eric talk more about that, but there's boosting and there's best bets. So talk a little bit more about why this is important, guys.
Yeah, this was a journey here, and this was one where the user feedback is really vital. And as we continue to kind of modify and improve and really optimize the search results, specifically under policy, which is a really common member value, for AAP in particular, it's a big driver of people's interest in the organization. What does AAP say about a given topic? And what we found is that even with calibrating the boosting, we needed to even go one step further, which is to add this toggle, which is defaulted to on, to hide the retired policies. And this is again, this was a big breakthrough for us to get to this stage where, because it's very opinionated in terms of search, right? So having an explicit toggle sorting out all the old policies was a big step, but an important one to really improve the results.
And especially when, like in this example, we have 15, 20 years worth of policies. Every year something different is coming up and could change a policy in the past. And people were definitely focusing on, well, I see 4 different versions of the same policy. What's your latest? What's your latest? This, allows somebody to automatically just see, okay, I want to see what your latest is. Just as long as this toggle is on, you see the latest. So it was a great improvement for this.
So there's a couple more advanced features here that I just given examples of. I'll let Joe and Eric, point out anything in particular before we get to kind of what the impact of this is on SEO, and then get into our last couple pillars.
Yeah, so most of these are improving the search engine from the point of view of the user experience, right? So the ability to clear the search box. Again, it's not a groundbreaking feature, but really just a little transparent feature that really helps the user experience. And likewise, many of these others are like that. So back to top or loading states, those are important just to complete the experience and make it feel like a modern website should. The error state is one that I would focus on a little more, which the error and the start state. And actually, we had a slide up front for that. We didn't call it out at that time, but one thing I would say is typically low-hanging fruit for most website search boxes is what do you show when I end up with no results? And often it's a very easy place to provide a little bit of a suggestion. You say, hey, you ended up with no results. Maybe you should try this. And in the case of AAP, we say maybe you should try an advanced search, or maybe you should select a context that would help you narrow the focus of your search so that maybe you'd be successful in finding what you're looking for. But point being, often the error state is empty or not helpful. And if you even just add a little blurb of text there, it can go a long way in helping the experience. Likewise with the start date, someone had been asking about, how often is the context selector being used? It's a good question. And one of the ways that you can address that is by helping users enter the right context from the beginning. So rather than relying on that dropdown, you could consider starting points or entry points into search that already have that context selected so that it's not as challenging to identify where do I switch that or what does that feature mean.
And some of the other things too, just to add as well, is like spelling, especially across the organization. There's so many different versions of it, and just the misspells and stuff. Did you mean this? That's been a huge improvement. And like Joe was saying on the error state, that's been helpful as well, because in the past it was like just a blank screen, 4 or 5 years ago, and that doesn't help anybody. And then people really get confused, and then you get feedback of, you have an error on your site. And it's like, no, you just didn't have search results. We're having something there that says, hey, you didn't find anything. Do you want this? And really help direct appropriately. It definitely helps in the user experience.
So Eric just kind of touched on that, but the impact that your on-site search has for SEO is not really about Google, although Google does take into consideration UX. So Joe, you pointed out, when we were talking about this, this is really all about the user, not Google. Anything else to add there before we get to our next Zoom hand raise? And we got
we don't have it
left.
featured here, but one of the things that I would point out is we do have some features, functionality baked into this particular website that do help with Google. And one of those concepts is called an automatic landing page, where we're able to create more permanent pages, because typically search result pages are dynamic, right? They're generated when I put in my query and then they go away. But in this search engine, we're able to tag content and have it be more static such that Google can pick it up. So there are some advantages to that as well, specifically to that offsite SEO. There are a few other things that we've done that I think are really important for the offsite SEO as well. Specifically on the commerce end, we've implemented some schema markup for the products, which is good for Google. But there's a multitude of things that we could get into. Those are just a couple of highlights.
And I'll just pause here for a minute, Joe. If you could take a look if there's any questions that we haven't gotten to, and then we'll move on to reputation management. We got about 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we touch on everything. These were the biggest sections of this presentation. But so I think we got enough time, but I want to make sure we cover any questions.
I think we've covered most of the questions. There's a comment earlier about the percentage of public or private content. One commenter said that most of their site, only 5% of the content is public. Analytics and KPIs. How do we measure success? So yeah, those are great questions. And some of the measure of success, I think, really comes down to the member sentiment. And one of the ways I mentioned we measure that is with the feedback loops built into the website. So we're able to, effectively say, like, how many complaints do we get? How many successful searches are we getting? That sort of thing from a feedback loop. We also use that feedback loop to help customer service, customer experience. Some of the feedback that we get is really interesting because it really has to do with, hey, I was looking for, managing my account or something like that. We're able to send those from our tool directly to customer service, which has helped them that way as well. Some of the other kind of metrics to look for are around the number of successful searches. So, clearly you want more successful searches, but we're able to measure of all the queries, how many resulted in a successful search. We're also able to see which queries ended unsuccessfully. And in addition to that, for the ones that ended unsuccessfully, where did they end up going? And those start to inform some of our kind of KPIs around it. Of course, with search, there's also potentially revenue generating KPIs. So we're not covering that in detail in this webinar, but the e-commerce component of search is a really big part of the whole search platform that we've created here. And that has specific, revenue generating type KPIs with it. But again, a lot of it for AAP, and I think is probably shared with many mission-based, member-based organizations, is that at the end of the day for us, the main goal is the member satisfaction in pursuit of their mission, which is, the health of children. So from that point of view, a lot of the work we've done has really been to optimize the user experience. And for example, the member directory, that's a high demand functionality for members. They want to be able to go in there and find a counterpart, find a peer, maybe a referral of something like that. So that's been, for example, a really focus on member experience as the main kind of ROI measurement. Let's see. Any other questions? So there's a comment about we've struggled with making content available for just members versus the public. The big issue is that our members are corporations and their employees are members. So identifying members is an issue. Any experience with this? Yeah, that's an interesting question. And that's where, we'd have to dig in a little bit more in understanding exactly what the audience dynamic is there. But I would guess that personalization could help kind of sort that out a bit. And often we're able to get member data from the AMS or similar system of record and combine that with other information so that we can better target individuals or corporations, and we could potentially show different messaging there.
Just because we're kind of running up on time, I want to touch on the fourth pillar, which is really about controlling your online reputation, like things like monitoring your location, reviews, events, things like that, in a tool like Google My Business. So we talked about the website being the biggest channel you have, but Joe likes to talk about this a lot, that your website's really your organization's brand. And Joe, if you want to hit that for a minute, and then we're going to jump into kind of an overview of Google My Business and its importance.
Yeah, so I really am fond of this pillar, more recently. I'd say over the last, 18 or 24 months, this is really emerging as a increasingly important aspect of managing your brand. And from that point of view, typical website is the biggest platform, right? And say, there are exceptions to that, but for most organizations, the website is really that primary digital channel. So it's that primary outlet for your brand, and making sure that that's, being managed well is really crucial. And what we're increasingly seeing is that your audience, your members, maybe not your members, sometimes it's general public, have the opportunity to engage with you in various places. And frequently what we're seeing is that those places, in this case specifically Google My Business, is an underutilized area of conversation with your audience. And we're seeing really great results with kind of continual emphasis on monitoring Google My Business and some of the functionality and features related to it. So for example, anyone can go to Google My Business and produce a review of your organization. Anyone can go to Google My Business and ask a question of your organization. Those are really key touch points to be aware of. And in addition to that, Google is increasingly adding some rich experiences. So in this case, we have the adage site pulled up, the map and the reviews and the hours and locations, all that. That's really improving the search experience for general public. What we found is that by monitoring Google My Business, it has driven a huge increase in traffic for us in particular, and also for our clients. Jake, did you want to touch on EAT?
Yeah, so it's one of the rich snippets, and one of the things that has an impact on search and search results and SEO is it's a kind of a Google principle. It's expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness of your content, and the people trusting your brand. This is managing Google My Business, being a brand that listens and talks back. And I think Joe talked about this a little bit, but when people give reviews, good or bad, you should respond to them. You should treat them like Glassdoor reviews. So
yeah, and that's a different platform, but similar practices, right? So with Google My Business, the best case is that your brand is alive there, right? And a thriving brand is active and responsive and addresses concerns. And also, I'd say part of the strategy there too is to manage Google My Business to their terms of service. So there's also potential for the brand to help itself just by understanding what is appropriate there and what's allowable there. Just a case in point for us is, for a technology company like Adage, location is important. And one of the things we found is that we had many squatters on our location. And by understanding what is allowable, we found that we could remove, I think we got to 47 competitors kind of squatting on our location. Now, that's the kind of activity I think that's really kind of groundbreaking, considering the importance of location-based searches and how Google treats that.
So I'll move on to the paid search piece here. But this is really about accelerating traffic to cornerstone traffic and cornerstone content. And one thing we wanted to touch on, Joe's got a couple things that he'll talk about here, but this is not necessarily the most effective way to search, but it's also, or to invest in your search, but it is a component. It is important. It's not quite as effective as great search experience that's not paid. So Joe talks about this healthy versus easy way to approach search, and I'll let him expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, so in this case, just to be more specific, the paid search that we're really considering is like a Google Ads paid search, right? And in their case, I think that this commentary really is related to what we see frequently as the approach. And frequently the approach is, hey, we think we need to be doing paid search, so let's do paid search. But very frequently what I see there is that it's treated as almost like a stimulant more than a strategy. So in this case, really the point that I make is the best approach is going to be the healthy eating approach and not the sugar rush approach. There's a lot of ways you can get your calories. In this case, we're talking about website traffic or conversions. The better approach is going to be, to eat your carrots and not your candy. And too frequently what I see is that organizations really emphasize paid search. They spend a lot on it, but don't get a ton of results. But you do get the vanity metric. You can really drive traffic really quickly, but too frequently that traffic doesn't really convert. So while I think it's it's part of a healthy mix of SEO overall to think about paid search, there's a lot of benefits potentially in it. I wouldn't use that as a starting point. I really focus on user experience, understanding your audience and what content they need before trying to stimulate traffic with PPC. And frequently what I'll see just as a symptom of this, if you're doing PPC and driving your traffic to your homepage, that's probably an indication that you're doing it wrong. in most cases, the homepage isn't optimized sufficiently for PPC. So if you see that, and I see that frequently, where you see clients driving traffic to the homepage, it does give you the result of more traffic, but that traffic is going to be too random and your content not refined or focused enough to convert. It's a good way to, kind of check yourself. If you're driving traffic to your homepage, it's probably more effective approaches. That said, the value of PPC, especially Google Ads, to me as a starting point, is you can run little experiments at pretty low cost to understand and leverage Google Ads machine learning tools. And they've really overhauled Google Ads in the last couple of years so that it's providing a lot more automated recommendations and is really providing a lot more insight and making it more digestible for an end user to get started with. And you can learn a lot from it. You can do keyword research. You can understand what competitor sites are focused on. There's a lot of insight to be gained just from having a Google Ads account and running a few low-cost campaigns.
This last thing that Joe kind of wanted to touch on is that you probably get 10 to 12 emails a week, maybe a day about SEO or PPC, and how qualified are the people to do that. And I'll let Joe talk a little bit more as I move on to kind of our wrap up here. I want to make sure we have a couple minutes left to answer any questions that we didn't, but
yeah,
Joe, if there's anything to add there.
Just a little, beware the PPC and the SEO consultants. And I don't know if it's just me, but I doubt it. I get maybe 10 of those a week where the proposal is, hey, for pennies on the dollar, I can improve your SEO. And for me, the philosophy is, eat your carrots and get your exercise. That's the right approach. If you're going for shortcuts, in the end, you might drive traffic, but I really would doubt that you'd get the conversions and satisfy member needs in that approach.
So that's kind of the end of our presentation. We wanted to make sure that we have our information here. If I can reach out or I can talk to Wade if anybody wants to talk to us more about some of the things that we talked about today. I can get you to Eric if you have any specific questions for him. But can we look at the chat one more time, and then Wade, Julia, I can turn it back over to you guys to wrap us up.
I would just also put your contact information in the chat because people can save the chat, and that way they'll have it as well. If Eric and Joe and Jake, if you could put your contact in the chat, then save it. Julie?
And while they're doing that, I would encourage each of you, if you have any additional questions, feel free to go ahead and raise your hand or put it in the chat. But also let us know what your most important takeaway was today. This gives great, valuable feedback to our instructors. So if you have any of those takeaways, please do let us know.
I put the wrong email address first. Was trying to multitask, so I just added it again. I'd love to talk to anybody else, but yeah, we'd love to hear what anybody has to say.
There was one question here about getting started with Google My Business. The first step is to claim your organization's account. It is a different type of account. It's very similar in that it uses Google single sign-on. So if you have a Google account, you can go in there and claim it, but it is a different platform like Google Analytics or Search Console.
Sure, there's more tools to come for Google.
Oh yeah, those are just the getting started. We didn't have opportunity today to talk about Google Search Console, which is another really important aspect.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah. Just to mention, especially for those that requested CAE and CPE credit, if you hadn't been answering those polling questions that were coming through, if you were not answering them in chat, you should respond to this question about what your most important takeaway is. Again, we do need to have, evidence that for credit purposes you were here for the meeting.
So on a final note, thank you, first off, for everyone for attending. Second, we will follow up within about 3 days with the slide deck that Ad used today, as well as a link to the video recording for you. Be looking for that. That will come from me directly. And I will also include Jake and Joe and Eric's information in there. So if you'd like to reach out to them, you can save today's chat by clicking from the chat box, the ellipsis down at the bottom. You can click on that and save the chat so that you have any of the questions or answers or information that was shared with you today. You have that at your fingertips. And finally, just to let you know what upcoming events UST Education has. Let me very briefly show you my screen. You can go to ustranscorp.com/education. You're able to register directly on the site there. But we have several great webinars upcoming here very shortly. Other than that, I think I don't have anything else for you. I don't know, Wade, Jake, Joe, Eric, anybody else have any information to add?
Just thank you very much for having us, and everybody for participating. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully everybody got some good information out of it. And Eric, of course, thank you for joining us and your willingness to share your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you, and thank everyone else. This is great.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks everyone for attending.
Great job, guys.
Great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.